Let's go to the Queen City, as it was a trade within the AFC North between the Cleveland Browns and the Cincinnati Bengals, as the Cincinnati Bengals traded for veteran quarterback Joe Flacco and a 6th-round pick, and the Browns receive a 5th-round pick as a part of this deal, according to ESPN's Adam Schefter. And Bengals head coach Zach Taylor said Joe Flacco will start Sunday at Green Bay for the Bengals. So, when I heard about the news that the Cincinnati Bengals had traded for Joe Flacco, in my eyes, this move came across as desperate. But they do have a saying that desperate times calls for desperate measures. And right now, the Cincinnati Bengals are desperate. And I came on the show the other day and I talked about how the Lions, they dominated the Bengals at Paycor Stadium Sunday afternoon, and Jake Browning, he was awful in that game. Zach Taylor was awful from a head coaching standpoint. And so, to me, the Bengals trading for Joe Flacco is a move to satisfy star receivers Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. That's the only reason why the Bengals make this move, because Jake Browning was so bad, he couldn't even get Jamar Chase and T. Higgins the football. That's how bad it was for Jake Browning in his previous starts for the Bengals. Jake Browning had regressed as a backup quarterback. And I said it on the show the other day, and I'm going to say it tonight. I believe that these defensive coordinators, they have film now on Jake Browning. And 2 years ago, when Browning came in and replaced Joe Burrow, these defensive coordinators, they didn't have film and they weren't putting together game plans against Jake Browning. Now that he's become the full-time starter, he's struggling because defensive coordinators have game plans and film in place to expose his weaknesses. And that's exactly what has happened in the first few starts of the 2025 season for Jake Browning. And so the Cincinnati Bengals had to make a move to give Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and their fan base hope. Now the question is, do I believe Joe Flacco is an upgrade over Jake Browning? And I would say the answer to that question is an emphatic no. The Cincinnati Bengals did not upgrade, bringing in a 40-year-old Joe Flacco to replace a Jake Browning. And let me explain why. I'm looking at Joe Flacco's ranks this season. Joe Flacco, his touchdown to interception ratio is 2-6. That's ranked dead last in the NFL. He's completing 58% of his passes. That's ranked 32nd, which is dead last in the NFL amongst starting quarterbacks. His yards to attempts is 5.1. That's ranked dead last in the NFL. His passer rating was 60.3, which is also ranked dead last in the NFL. Let's compare his numbers to Jake Browning's numbers. Jake Browning is 0-3 for the season. Joe Flacco, 1-3 as a starter for the Cleveland Browns. Jake Browning, yards per pass attempt were 6.1. Joe Flacco's yards per pass attempt were 5.1. Jake Browning, touchdown to interception ratio was 6-8. Joe Flacco's touchdown to interception ratio, again, was 2-6. Both ranked top 3 in interceptions thrown this season. So I do not believe that bringing in Joe Flacco to replace Jake Browning makes the Cincinnati Bengals a better football team. I see Bengal fans, and I got family and friends who are texting me, and they are excited about this move. And I'm thinking to myself, Joe Flacco's not an upgrade over Jake Browning. Now, Jake Browning was playing terrible, and the Bengals were going absolutely nowhere with Jake Browning. But Joe Flacco, he's 40 years old. He's well past his prime. And it's a reason why the Cleveland Browns traded Joe Flacco within the division, because the Cleveland Browns, they were completely done with Joe Flacco. They were moving on to Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, and so he had no use being on the Browns roster. So they traded Joe Flacco for a 5th-round pick. It's a win for the Browns because now they get an opportunity to evaluate Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders and see whether or not they have their franchise quarterback in the building. But for the Bengals, Joe Flacco is 40 years old, and he's not playing better currently than Jake Browning is, and he doesn't have any mobility. This is a Cincinnati Bengals offensive line that is already the worst offensive line in pro football. They couldn't protect Joe Burrow, for crying out loud. They couldn't protect Jake Browning. You think they're going to be able to protect a 40-year-old Joe Flacco who is well past his prime? And I know Joe Flacco, when you look at his statistics for his career, Joe Flacco, 259 passing touchdowns, 168 interceptions, 46,512 passing yards, completing 62% of his passes for his career. And he's also won a Super Bowl. That was back in 2013. That version of Joe Flacco no longer exists. And so to me, the Bengals did not upgrade by trading for Joe Flacco and having Joe Flacco replace Jake Browning. It was a desperate move by the Cincinnati Bengals. But I understand, because desperate times calls for desperate measures. And that's exactly what we have here. He has zero mobility. And the thing is, the Bengals offensive line is already a bad offensive line. So to me, a better fit would have been a Russell Wilson, because Russell Wilson also has passed his prime, but Russell Wilson has more mobility than Joe Flacco. So I think Russell Wilson would have been a better fit than Joe Flacco. I would have even tried to trade for Jameis Winston. Now, Jameis Winston throws a lot of interceptions, but he also throws a lot of touchdowns. And at least with Jameis Winston and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, you have the entertainment factor in place. Because we all know Jameis Winston is an entertainer. If nothing else, Jameis Winston is an entertainer at the quarterback position. So I believe the Bengals would have been better off trading for either Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston. So this move to me does not move the needle and make the Bengals a better football team now than they were with Jake Browning at quarterback. Now, the bigger issue with the Cincinnati Bengals is beyond who's playing quarterback for them. And I said this on the show a few nights ago, and I'm going to say it again. I know Zach Taylor, for his career, he's 48, 55, and 1. So he's won 47% of his games. I know Zach Taylor. In 2021 and 2022, Zach Taylor, as head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals, he won the AFC North in back-to-back seasons. I know Zach Taylor, as head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals, led the Bengals to back-to-back AFC Championship game appearances in 2021 and in 2022. And in 2021, they actually made the Super Bowl. And I also know that the Cincinnati Bengals offense has been an elite offense for the last 5 years under Zach Taylor. But I believe because Joe Burrow got injured week 2 against the Jacksonville Jaguars, it has forced Zach Taylor to be more creative offensively, and Zach Taylor has come up short in that department as the Cincinnati Bengals head coach. Because the thing is, if you have Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and at the time they also had Joe Mixon and Tyler Boyd, then as a coach who's calling plays, it's easier to design plays because you're leaning on your personnel's talent. And the Bengals had elite talent at the skill position group featuring Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd, and an elite quarterback in Joe Burrow. So Zach Taylor's job was easy. But since Joe Burrow has gotten injured, Zach Taylor has been put in a position to where he is expected to be more creative as an offensive mind. And he has come up short. How many times are we going to see the Cincinnati Bengals line up in shotgun? For the life of me, I can't understand what the hell Zach Taylor is thinking when he continues to line his quarterbacks up in shotgun. This is why Joe Burrow is out for the season with a turf toe injury. Now, I know they said he's going to come back in December, but I think he's going to be out for the season. They just don't want to announce it yet. But how can we expect the offensive line to protect their quarterback when they're always pass blocking in shotgun situations? And that also speaks to the Bengals right now and their offense. I'm looking at this Bengals team right now. Let's look at their offense. Points per game, they're averaging 17 points per game. That's ranked 29th in the NFL. They average 119 total yards per game. That's ranked dead last in the NFL. They average 172 passing yards per game. That's ranked 29th in the NFL. They average 57 yards rushing per game. That's ranked dead last in the NFL. And Chase Brown is actually a good running back. I think Chase Brown is more talented than we actually know, but he is not able to put his talents on display because Zach Taylor does not run the football with Chase Brown. And let's look at Zach Taylor's record with Joe Burrow compared to without Joe Burrow. This is the Bengals with and without Joe Burrow since they drafted Joe Burrow in 2020. With Joe Burrow, Zach Taylor is 40, 30, and 1. Without Joe Burrow, he's 6 and 11. With Joe Burrow, the Bengals average 25 points per game. Without Joe Burrow, they average 19 points per game. With Joe Burrow, they average 351 yards per game. Without Joe Burrow, they average 288 yards per game. So that tells me that Joe Burrow has covered up for a lot of the Bengals' deficiencies as a football team. And Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, they have made Zach Taylor look better as an NFL head coach than he actually is. I just watched last week, in prime time, I watched the San Francisco 49ers without Brock Purdy, without Jawan Jennings, without Ricky Pearsall. They rolled into LA and they beat a healthy LA Rams team with Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford. You know what that tells me? That Kyle Shanahan knows what he's doing. And he is a genius as an NFL head coach. And when I watch these other offensive minds in the NFL, the Kyle Shanahans of the world, the Sean McVays of the world, the Matt LaFleur's of the world, the Andy Reids of the world, I see more creativity offensively than I do with the Zach Taylor Cincinnati Bengals as the head coach. And Zach Taylor's signature is offense. And I say it all the time. Whatever is your signature, whether it's offense or defense, that side of the ball has to be good or elite. And right now, the Cincinnati Bengals offense is not even an average offense. And this is a team that has the best receiver duo in Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And they got a really, really good, talented, up-and-coming running back in Chase Brown. And if I'm Chase Brown, I would be thinking, get me the hell out of Cincinnati. I'm better than this. I am better than this. But again, for me, I do not believe that the Bengals upgrade with Joe Flacco over Jake Browning. And I believe that Zach Taylor's time as the Cincinnati Bengals head coach has come to an end. And if you are a Cincinnati Bengals fan, you want more games like the game that took place in Minnesota when the Bengals got blew out 48-10. Because you want games in blowout fashion, and maybe, just maybe, Mike Brown will make the decision to move off of Zach Taylor at the end of the season. Those are my thoughts on the Cincinnati Bengals as we currently speak.